only quite recently is there slowly some attention being paid to creative thinking skills. Typically, my background is in literature and cultural studies, and I know that at no point in all of my studies was anyone really interested in creative skills that I thought I had. Because as I write poetry, I never really, because of course I took some of the classes in creative work. I mean, in literature you have options to take, for instance, creative writing. But no one really, this became so routine that I actually left the class. I felt that this wasn't what I wanted to do. It didn't really speak to my needs. Even though right from as early as I can remember, I was writing. And before I finished university, I had at least 2 volumes of poetry. Nobody seemed to be interested in this. Of course, I wrote in the typical student magazines of this point. But nobody seemed to be interested in creative skills. So it is something I noticed in the curriculum right across. And by and large, I have also fallen into that kind of routine process, developing people's thinking skills only in the critical area, but not in the creative area. So this is really something that our educational system needs to be looking at. So before I get on now, I would like to ask you yourselves, what would you think are the main differences between creative thinking and critical thinking? Generally. I'm setting you up. What would you say are key differences between the critical way of looking at something and the creative way of looking at it? Yes?
I think when you look at something critically, you're trying to find loopholes. You're trying to find loopholes, things that are not right. And this is looking at it in a way that you're trying to find faults, possibly maybe to address it or not. What creativity has to do with when you are trying to, something that is novel, something new, something, you are trying to create something from, maybe not necessarily nothing, but something that is, you are looking at it from a different perspective altogether, a new approach to something, instead of just criticizing it and not necessarily charting a path for it.
Yes. Take the man in the middle, and then I can. All right. Yes, he's blessed among women. Okay.
Well, from the understanding that I'm gathering from this, I'm thinking critical thinking would have more to do with absolutes and also science. Maybe it's a scientific way of looking at something, so that it's at the end of the day you always arrive at the same answer or the same general way of looking at a particular thing. But being creative is, okay, like they say, there's a new term that everybody likes to say, thinking outside the box, which is, basically what creative thinking is. Using your imagination, your talents, your the leanings that you have, maybe some of the things that you were born with, to try to solve problems, which I think are more.
There's a dimension that has introduced which is important. Not just thinking for thinking's sake, but thinking in order to find solutions to things, to problems, actual problems that exist, which are observable. I think that's the dimension. Yes?
I think critical thinking is more analytical. Creative thinking is more exploratory. It's more like discovering things that on a normal day someone would have seen if they hadn't really taken a deeper look, exploring other options, looking for alternatives. I think that's what
see, there's a third dimension that you brought in, that critical thinking is analytical. When you analyze, you break down things. You break down things in their component parts. But it's another kind of skill to put those things together. So there is an analytical skill, there is a synthetical skill. Really? It's true that we need both skills, but I think our question has been, why do we have to keep emphasizing only one direction? Okay, so that's another aspect of it. That in critical skills, you analyze things, you break them down to the component parts, which is an important thing to do. But there's also the part of putting it all together, recombining, making new combinations.
My understanding of creative thinking is that it's more broad-minded, whereby you're borrowing,
creative thinking.
Creative thinking. Yes. You're borrowing from different things. You're not narrow-minded, as opposed to critical thinking. It's very focused. It's a focused approach to thinking about things. But being creative, you open up your mind to different things.
The generative capacity, the capacity to generate new things, new ideas, new possibilities, unlike critical thinking, which works only with what is there, what is available. For creative thinking, what is not available is quite as important as what is available. So let's move on, because I think there's a lot. Now this comes from the typical educational system. This man did a lot of work in this area from long ago, and looking at the American situation. Taxonomy of educational objectives, and what he did, his work exemplifies his attention to critical thinking. Look at what he has developed, the classification of intellectual behavior in learning. What is it? The cognitive area, the psychomotor areas, as in sports, for instance, okay? And the affective areas. But look at what happens in the cognitive, his own identification of the levels of the cognitive area. Knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. But at least we have some idea now of where learning can go, is allowed to. Okay, so this is really more or less what critical thinking involves logical thinking skills. Is this important or not? It's important. Logical thinking, comparing things, classifying things, creating sequences, looking at the causes and patterns, the analogies. This is important work. For managers, for those who manage enterprises, who manage resources, who manage persons, it's important to create these logical systems, the boxes. They're useful because we need to be able to identify is largely because, well, for managerial purposes, even if you can't spend all your time, for instance, dealing with each person, you don't have all of those resources. So it's important to create these small boxes. But if everyone were to be in the box, who is going to be able to create the new things needed for the classification starts? Okay, so this is really where the challenges are. On the other hand, creative thinking involves some degree of original thinking, something new, but more importantly, flexibility, the fluency, elaborating things, storming, modifying things, associating things. All of these are forms of creative thinking. The idea is to stimulate curiosity and promote divergence. Not all on one line, not everyone in the box, but some divergences, something that is not predictable. And so you have the typical brain patterns. I think we are all familiar with this. The left brain and the right brain thinking. Which one is the one that's critical and which one is creative?
The right brain is creative.
Yes, and the left brain is critical one. Or lateral. It's also another term that's used, lateral thinking, to refer to creative thinking forms, okay, and vertical thinking, the logical processes. You can see the analysis in analytical versus generative and synthetical forms of thinking. Converging things or diverging them. Probabilities, which is a scientific procedure, or possibilities belong to the realm of creativity. All forms. Focus, as you said, as the term you used, and diffuse. Objective and sometimes very subjective. Logical versus metaphorical. So you have this, the box like this. Creative thinking versus critical thinking. This is really typical. Well, it doesn't mean, for instance, that verbal creativity you know, as in writing, is not creative. That is no, but it implies that typically even the persons who write, they first visualize. They first visualize situations, scenes, as in novel, even in poetry. Sometimes you visualize things in a rhythmic form. I say that when I write poetry, I don't think of the words, I think of the sounds. Really, what comes to my mind when I write poetry is not the words, it's the sounds. And that's something that is musical. It is the rhythm that I write with. I don't write with the words or meanings. It's the rhythm that's in me. I'm trying to realize that I put words and meanings to the rhythm. It's not the other way around. Because if you're the other way around, I'll be doing, I mean, from my own experience of writing poetry, what really keeps it moving is the rhythm. How does this sound? What are the, if I were to dance to it, how would I dance to it? If I were to do some kinds of, how would I do with this? So it's really the sounds that move me. It's not the words or the meanings as such. So really, in many ways, that's associated as visual. Okay? Or at least it's auditory. It's another aspect of my being, my senses that I use to do that. So these are kinds of boxes that we create. So basically, creativity is an ability. But it's also more than an ability, an attitude. Because we really don't all have to be great poets or great writers. We don't all have to be inventors, but we are all creative. So it's first and foremost an attitude before it is in fact an ability. We all possess this ability, but what can make the world really more creative is the attitude. Because to a certain degree we all possess critical thinking skills, we can develop them. We possess creative thinking skills, we can develop them. And as we will soon say once again, from creativity to innovation, it doesn't all have to be in one way. The ability to do something different, for instance, even an organization, the ability to create new processes, new ways of addressing old problems, that's creative. It doesn't have to consist in creating any music or any movie or any form or inventing, something in technology. It doesn't have to be like that. Because we all possess some innate creative ability. But more than the ability, it is the attitude that really counts. And then the processes. This is really where the management of creativity really counts. Because at the end of the day, you may create, but there needs to be innovation. It is really what is created by individuals that becomes innovation, that enterprises really take hold of in order to turn into something that can be commercialized, that can be practical purposes, useful to organizations, to people, to society, to mankind. So the processes are also part of creativity. So creativity is also a process, not just an ability. So, as an ability, this means our capacity to imagine or to invent something new. It's not ability to create out of nothing, because I think only God can do that. To create ex nihilo comes from God. It's God who can create something, who can imagine what is not there. We can only imagine what is there. Perhaps we can imagine what is not there in terms of the form, but we really cannot imagine matter that's not available. In other words, typically the matter is provided. It's the combination of matter, basically, that we can imagine. Because that ability to create out of nothing belongs exclusively to God. Our own capacities, which are also very great, is to generate new combinations of things, so new ideas out of existing ideas. That is the ability. And the ideas can be created, generated out of combining things, changing them, reapplying existing ideas. But some ideas, when they are combined, changed, or reapplied, they can be so astonishing, so brilliant that we wonder, why didn't I ever think about that? But others are so simple that no one in fact seems to have thought about that. We read a case recently of how the razor blade became, in fact, the Gillette, okay, that we shave with. I mean, what are the thoughts behind moving from the knife onto the razor blade and then from the razor blade onto the cartridge that we now use? There are all kinds of things. It may look very simple, but there is an important difference between using a knife to shave and using a razor blade to shave and using the cartridge to shave. Because it makes it possible not only for men, but even for the ladies to shave without any, shall we say, discomfort or any kind of public shame. So some ideas are brilliant, original, in true sense. Others are simply combinations. But at the end of the day, they are all useful for us. Society works with this. Okay. As I said, creativity is also an attitude. It's the ability to accept change and newness. As you know very well, there are many people who are resistant to change. When you study technology and the way it's adopted, some adopt it very early. The people with an attitude for change, people who are change agents, who really looking for something new in their lives, and suddenly they pick on something, oh yes, this is something. Or someone who just have an attitude for novelty, something new. But later on, of course, many people, the majority, will wait until they really see this, more diffuse, more, people are using it, and then they decide, let me see how, let me be part of those who are really new ideas, new products tend to work in that way. So really, the attitude is also very important, because without the attitude, to look at something new, to look at the possibilities, the flexibility, just to find something different. This attitude is important for those who create and those who actually use new products. Creativity is an attitude. Not just ability, but an attitude to accept change. The capacity is there, the willingness to work with new possibilities. This is the attitude. You see, because typically we are socializing to accepting normal things. For instance, in our country, a house is not a house until you build it with blocks. But I mean, you and I know that, particularly in the United States, a lot of it is wood. It's plug and play. Just sit there, and they are as beautiful looking as the things we spend millions trying to construct. It doesn't have to be that expensive. And of course, our parents, they built with mud. It was also original thinking for them. And they might well be, in fact, I hear that when this storm broke in New Orleans, it turned out that some of the houses that actually withstood the flooding, were submerged, they were not the ones that typically built either with wood or with blocks, but with specific materials that were so much cheaper. So there is a lot of an attitude to things that we are used to. And so change is always something that people in general are resistant to. But if you have an attitude for creativity, an attitude for innovations, you will consider the possibility of doing something different, something new. And there will be resistance at first, but eventually, if you persist, and with all the other dynamics of change management, somebody might just say, let me try this, and it will catch fire. You just move on, make a difference in the lives of people. So the attitude is important, to move beyond the normal things, and to look at the so-called non-normal, the ones that are not normative. And then, of course, it's a process. Because you see, as we look at the characteristics of creative people, it's not enough merely to have the idea. The idea becomes really an idea when you are able to keep working at it, refining it, developing it. It is this process of refinement that truly creative people bring to bear upon their work. Not just, everybody has an idea. Everybody has one idea or another. But do you have the persistence to keep working at this idea until you are able to ensure that there's a defined process? This is where the difference lies between just having ideas, dreams that are the fancy of anyone, and true dreams that come to reality. Working through the process with an attitude, with the ability. If you get the process into the picture, you can have creative and innovative products. So, very few things indeed come out this way. There's a small example that I worked with when I was doing my PhD. The idea that the Greeks invented the vowel, you see, because when what we now call the alphabet, which is really the Greek version of the alphabet. The alphabet is the Semitic alphabet. Didn't have any vowels. And typically our scriptures were written in Aramaic and didn't have a vowel system. But when the alphabet moved to Greece, eventually the Greeks developed a vowel system for it. Beyond the consonant, developed a vowel system to make it articulable, something you can pronounce. Because you see, with a typical consonantal system like the Semitic form, you really are not always sure which vowel, how this is going to be, because any set of vowels can come in. So the Greeks developed, a vowel system for the alphabets. But scholars had always assumed as if all of this was just, a one-off development by the Greeks. But my study revealed that it really didn't work like that at all. On the contrary, even from among the Semitic people, they had been developing some pre-vowel systems called, they're called syllabaries. These syllabaries were not exactly vowels, but a combination of ways of trying to recognize typical consonantal combinations, so that in a way you can keep repeating some things have a certain routineness about it. In fact, it was these syllabaries that the Greeks then developed in order to create what we now call the alphabet. It's a rather old-fashioned academic example, but it showed me very clearly that very few developments are actually just sudden like that. There is an idea, somebody develops it, and sometimes not the same person, another person picks on it and refines it until you can even look at that with our own ICT system today. The kinds of changes, and I'll give you one example of how we were. I'll give you an example of this is where we were. This is what has become this and even more 3G now. Can you look at the difference between this and that? Really? So that it's usually a gradual development from one form, somebody picks it and turns it around and creates something new, and then at another stage another picks it and refines it. This is typically, you can see the pants we wear now, they wear pantaloons. They wear half pants this way until someone decided to extend them. And so really, every kind of creation always passes through a certain process. There's hardly any creative product that we have today which did not pass through stages. To look at creativity also, beyond the attitude, beyond you know, the ability as a process. So that when you get to a certain stage and you feel, well, this still hasn't quite solved my problem, but it may have improved a certain stage in the development and meeting of your needs. Really, you need to be thinking, how can we make it just a little better? Not necessarily to solve all of the problems, but just a little better. That's part of the process of vision. Okay. And of course, you know how it is, as you well know, at a certain stage, because you are, you know, you run enterprises, you can say, let us finish this thing until we achieve the most perfect result before we go to the market. It may well be that, look, you can keep fiddling with this in the R&D, but right now we need to go to the market with what we have, which will make a difference. And meanwhile, you can keep on with the development. So, really, typically, creative methods pass through different kinds of. Some are evolutionary. If you are revolutionary, others consist in synthesizing things, and others really in going in a different direction altogether. So there's not just one single path to creativity. Okay? Just to bear that in mind. And the evolutionary part consists of, you know, small improvements, new solutions, improving things slightly, developing what has improved onto another stage. So these things will pass through different stages of development. And because we have entered a stage in world history now where innovations really are critical to the survival of industries, truth of the matter is there will be continuous improvement of things. Things can no longer stand the way they used to be. For a long time, a certain stage of development will be arrived at, and then you wait for another half century before the change comes. I'm afraid we have since crossed the Rubicon as far as that's concerned. Things are going to be reformed, the changes very frequently. So the pace of change, even in the evolutionary path, is speeded up very seriously. Revolution is one part. Revolution is another one altogether. In our own country, where we had fixed telephony systems, cables, and then we now have something that's entirely revolutionary, the way that we communicate. I'm actually looking forward to that day when, in fact, even our educational, the way we deliver learning will be entirely transformed. I do not personally think that we need to stick with a situation where we must have face-to-face meetings all the time. I mean, even here at the SMC, we are not thinking of modular learning schemes. We are, in fact, people anywhere, part of our country, even outside our country, can deliver between 60 and 70% of our learning online. Then the other 25%, 30%, perhaps because we want to see people face-to-face. In fact, we have started to think through this modular system, and I hope that before my time runs out next year or year after, I'll be able to deliver some modular learning schemes for people who want to patronize them. I believe that the time will eventually arrive when you design what you want to learn. Okay? These are the things that I want to learn. You go online or you go to an institution and say, look, these are the courses that I want to learn. You don't have to learn anything from one school. You can pick and choose. You aggregate the things you want to learn, and then we have a system of certification. Close to your NUC, they can then decide, okay, this person has got a combination that we think you can award a certificate for. So you get a certificate after aggregating the learning skills. I think that education, all of this is really going to change. believe that in the next few decades, we will not be delivering learning the way we're doing now. Because in many ways, I think that this is the old-fashioned. It may still be important to meet people, but you meet people for different reasons, not necessarily because you want to deliver learning face-to-face. So there will be changes. Changes are coming, but I don't want to steal, Adelegan's thunder, because I think he's going to say something about what is going to happen in the 21st century, because really the game has changed. Okay, so this is different methods, and as I said, reapplication is another way to looking at something old in a new way, going beyond labels, discovering how something can be reapplied. Look at the junkyard and you think this is just nonsense, but somebody goes there and creates an artwork out of it. Okay. Newspapers that you can dump, somebody look at our staircase, you see somebody uses a newspaper to create an artwork. Or bottle tops, or any kind of, so people who are thinking critically with this is crap, but somebody who has creative ideas have a new combination for this good stuff. All right, I'm trying to wind up now, so that we can take a bit of break before the comes in. So creative insights will take place when there's breakthrough, when attention is shifted one angle to a problem, to look at the problem differently. And problems become really opportunities for something new. Not things that will destroy us, these are problems, these are challenges, but opportunities. Opportunities for developing something new. Because you also need to be looking at attitudes really as the critical part of this whole thing. Creative people will typically be curious, they will see problems as opportunities, as interesting challenges, seek solutions, and they will enjoy the challenge of it. Never giving up, they keep working at it. Never accepting the same assumptions with this. And not, holding permanent judgment about things, but to rethink, to suspend definitive judgments about things. These are some of the characteristics of creative people. Sense of curiosity, sense of children are typically very creative. When they see anything, they want to find out what it is. Okay, many of them, because they are at the oral stage, they want to bite it. What is it? How does this one taste? Or they pick it, they just want to dismantle it. They want to. And because we are so critical, we usually will remove it, take it away. Not necessarily because the thing is going to hurt them, but often because we don't want our objects destroyed. When they hold the book, we want to secure the book. No, we don't really care so much about the child and how the child feels, but we want to secure the object more than the needs of the child, because the children, by their nature, are so creative, they want to find out what is it. They dismantle it, but you are interested in securing this object. They're typically creative people. They don't really have the time to be critical. Their needs, they need to know, find out what this is. So it's important to get away from negatives. It's negative attitudes. Now there's a problem. But you don't think that with every problem there's a solution. Because when you see the problem, you should think, if there's a problem, then there certainly is a solution to the problem. It comes with the territory. That the problem has a solution. What is the solution? Which is why, it's important for you to look at that Bono's book, those 6 hearts, so that you don't keep wearing only the critical heart. You also wear the creative heart. Now we've identified the problem. We can analyze the problem very carefully. Now remove that and put on the green heart, the creative thinking heart. Let's find the solutions. These are typical negative things. It's childish because children are creative. It's good to think of them as child. You can know, you see that people who are creative actually have certain childlike attitudes about them. The passion that drives them. you take something from a child and the child is going to burst into tears. It's very exasperated because it's trying to exercise something here, but you are preventing this exercise. And creative people typically be frustrated when you don't give them the opportunity to express their creativity. Well, what do people think because we are concerned about people's societal approaches and so on, or with our own psychological fears of failure? You fail, you start again. Or the fixed attitude that says, it can't be done, it's impossible. But we've been seeing impossible things happen. You know, if God had intended man to fly, he would have given him wings. But, yeah, it is. We are flying. If he had intended man to swim, he would have given him fins. Okay, we don't have fins, but we have submarines. So really, the negative attitudes are more destructive of creativity than anything else. Yeah, prejudices, functional fixations, this is the way it works and it really can't work any other way. This man helplessness, no NEPA, no tools, nothing. And so we can keep rotating around that nothingness rather than, okay, so we have got a problem, yes, okay, so let's find a solution to it. That's an opportunity for a solution. Okay? And the idea that there's only one solution, right? One and only one solution. Right? And best answers have been found. Right? Somebody woke up and decided, look, if you have desktop computers and you have mobile phones and they all depend upon the digital system, certainly you can find a midway between them. And somebody is going to come up with something that works even better. We cannot say we have exhausted the possibilities at all. We cannot say that. Because really the possibilities have only started, even in the ICT world. There's not one and only one solution, and we have not found the definitive answer yet. It's better to have the positive attitude. Yes, this attitude that we talked about before, curiosity, seeing this as something that challenges us, constructive discontent, attitude that problems can be solved, to see the good in anything that's actually very bad. So we have security problems, but certainly there's something good here. And you know, we have to think like God who always picks something good out of something that's so terrible. We have the creativity right from the scriptures. Something terrible, the fall of man, and then he said it's also right. So we're far better now than we would have been. Really? Yeah. In my church, they say, Felix culpa, a happy thought that demands that we sinned. So now we really can get the Son of God himself right now. That's a wonderful solution. Adam didn't have the benefit of this one. We should, that's some of the things we should look at, and I think we'll have a little break before Mr. Adelegan comes. Thank you all very much. Welcome to our class, Mr. Adedapo, Adelegan. Just to give you a bit of information, not a full citation because this is very brief. This man is a man of ideas. He is one of the most creative persons that I have come across. He is a marketer and PR consultant, a man with a vision, among other things, to influence part of the world with his personality, investment of his personality. See, he has a passion for our continent. That's important. Now, his foray into entrepreneurship started as a very young person. He began what became Africa's biggest musical event in 1988, Sunsplash. You know, that concert led to a real change, radical change in the way that musical concerts are presented in our country. And since then, he's conceptualized, packaged, and promoted by DP Lekki Limited. The concert, as you know, has undergone, I mean, he's even left all that for others to run. His exploits with PR Africa International projects, including Made in Nigeria exhibition, he initiated that. All these have attracted a lot of commendations and encomia from notable citizens, both inside and outside Africa, including the past president of our country, Chief Bishop. He's just concluded the Opportunity in Nigeria, a PR Africa UK collaboration with the Chamber of Commerce. One of these associations that began from way back in 2007, including Opportunity Africa in 2010. This event, this Opportunity Africa, this conference and exhibition, since been in collaboration with new partnerships for African development. So in fact, he's at the bridgehead of the NEPAD, this new partnership for Africa, this NEPAD of the African Union. Okay. Now, he's a consultant to various government agencies. He is, among other things, is the fellow of the Institute of Direct Marketing of Nigeria, a council member of the International Public Relations Association, vice president of the Nigeria-British Chamber of Commerce. He belongs to, among other things, his associations, as I said before, the International Public Relations Association, Federation of Africa Public Relations Association, Institute of Directors in Nigeria, Institute of Directors, the UK, the AFCON. He is also a member, and I think, I don't know what executive post he holds here, the Nigerian South African Chamber of Commerce, the International Music Promoters Association. He belongs to the Tourism Consultative Group, Lagos State, the Advertising Association of Nigeria, the University of Lagos Tourism Management Board, Eminent Persons Group on Technical Education in Ondo State. He's also chairman of the Ondo State Tennis as Lawn Tennis Association. He is recognized as one of the top 50 marketing experts in Nigeria, as you can see from the Nigerian marketing memos. His message has been promoting brand Nigeria, made in Nigeria goods, as well as providing leadership and entrepreneurship training to Nigerian youth through his Life in the 21st Century lecture series. And this is what we're going to have the benefit of. He is going to speak to us about life in the 21st century. Please.